Hello, my name is Brian Browlis, and this is how physics is part of our daily life. So, why people have to use physics? So, physics is part of daily life because every single aspect of life is revolved around physics. So, the definition of physics deals with all properties of matter, energy, motion, and force. And so, every single action that is being made has to use some type of energy or motion. And this motion is pretty much what allows people to walk, it allows what cars to drive, it allows all these things. So to be able to have a world without physics, it would be at the world without motions, which just couldn't happen. Another property of physics that has to do with mass. And so anything that has mass has gravity. And so every single thing that has weight, such as people or vehicles or textbooks or computers, they all have to have mass, which is another thing of physics. Another attribute of physics has to do with like friction and atoms, and friction allows things to stop, and atoms are what make up everything. And so there's different rules to how atoms work and different aspects of all those individuals. So every single one of these principles are used in daily life. So because without having these things, you pretty much would not be able to have life in general. Things just would not exist. So it's very important to understand the importance of physics. So physics can be used for research, which you can use to take on to higher degrees, but it's also good to use for just having general information for understanding how the world works. With different rules and systems, these things are kind of needed to understand how to like experiments work. It also allows you to have pretty much the power of information to be able to use it in different situations, which it's just good to have general knowledge of how things work, such as inertia with how cars work, or to be able to know friction with how things stop. So these are pretty much the most common things I think of whenever I think of friction in daily life. And so the first thing that I came to mind has to do with gravity. And so anything that has mass has some type of gravity. So in the solar system, the main source of gravity that comes from us that we know of is the sun. And so all the planets orbit around the sun because it has gravity on it. Because the sun is the heaviest mass object in our solar system, everything orbits the sun because it's gravity. Gravity, also Earth has gravity, and we are affected by that. So we're walking to work or driving or just going to class, we are affected by the Earth's gravity. Um, and so another aspect about gravity is people. People also have mass, which means people also have gravity. So gravity can be kind of observed when people jump up. And so like as they're jumping up, gravity pulls them back down. So at the same time, gravity pulls on people. But people also have mass, which means that the earth also kind of pulls to them. And the effect of gravity being affected on people is pretty great because the earth is a lot heavier than people are. But it's also kind of ironic that something so small as people compared to the earth still pull the earth in a very, very minor way, but it still is a property that happens. Another thing is that without gravity, you wouldn't be able to have like running or jumping, and all these properties are pretty much needed for friction, because otherwise you would just float off and fly away from Earth. Another property that I thought of when I first used physics about how I use it is which is friction, because friction is needed to be able to slow things down. It's also used to be able to set things still. It's like why whenever I place a laptop down, it doesn't fly off. It's why I can sit down. It's like what I can use to start a walk. It's all these concepts. It's also like why things that are still are hard to push, and there's also different types of friction that are there. So one of the types of friction that's used is static friction. So static friction is what allows things to stay in rest. So things that don't move generally are in static friction. It's also kind of like how a car keeps from sliding down a hill when it's parked with the brake. And so it pretty much allows that object to be able to stand still and to not be in motion, which is pretty handy when you think about it, because when if objects weren't able to stand still, we just would be like flying through and wouldn't be able to sit still at all. The most common type of friction I think when people think of uh, friction has to do with like kinetic friction, with how things work together. So like an example of this can be like friction when like walking. The kickoff needed has to do with friction, and so also sliding down a slide, the friction that's made that they're still accelerating, but there's still some friction that's slowing them down. Another type of friction that's used is rolling friction, liquid friction. So with rolling friction, that has to do with wheels. And so any wheels on a flat surface has to do with rolling friction. And so the most common idea I think of when people think of rolling friction is wheels on an inclined plane, how the different speed would be rather than like a box on a plane versus a wheel. The wheel's going to start rolling, and there's going to be some type of friction that's involved there. Another type of the friction like I was talking about was liquid friction. And so with liquid friction, it kind of works with solid objects or gas objects that are in liquid or liquid and gas or vice versa. And so the most common application I think of this has to do with air resistance because let's say a plane that's in air, it flies and it goes through air, so it's a solid gas, which would be a type of liquid friction. And so the knowledge of using friction allows us to understand how we can better create airplanes, better cars. The better we understand liquid friction, the more we can understand what makes things aerodynamic, what makes things faster. And these are all applications that are in our cars and are in planes that we use to travel. So these are very common things that we use. It's also like whenever we try to swim, it's also, it affects so many things that we don't really think about it when it happens. So another thing that is, that we use from physics is thermal energy. And thermal energy is also known as heat energy. It's also like what keeps people warm. And so this energy also can be produced through kinetic energy because like when you rub your hands, you feel some type of heat that's being made. That's friction creating thermal energy because not all the kinetic energy can be made. I mean, not can be transferred. So some of that is just turned into thermal energy. It's also produced in people because we turn chemical energy, and then some of that chemical energy turns into heat, and so that keeps us warm. And so that heat energy is what is used to maintain homeostasis, and homeostasis is pretty much the equal balance needed to survive. And so if we didn't have thermal energy, we wouldn't be able to survive. So physics is a part of thermal energy, part of physics. So without physics, we wouldn't be alive because we need heat to be able to keep our body going. Another type of energy I thought about physics is light energy. And so what light energy is, it's a wavelength that is the only type of energy that can be seen with the eye. And so different different wavelengths of color are what you use to be able to see different colors. So the different types of wavelengths are what we observe as different colors. Also, most light that comes on Earth comes from the sun, and most plants use the light from the sun to be able to produce glucose for themselves. And so this light energy that comes from the sun is what feeds all the plants, and animals eat plants. So we eat plants and animals, so without light energy, we would not have food. So this is another aspect that we have to have. Without these things, we would not be able to have enough energy to keep ourselves alive. So without light energy, we wouldn't have life on Earth. Another thing which I think is pretty important is inertia. And so inertia is the tendency of a body to rest, a change in motion, or rest. So pretty much what this means is an object in motion has to stay in motion. So like a car that's going is going to keep going unless it's applied by friction. This is also kind of an example of this can be kind of seen with riding in a car. And while riding in the car and the car's going fast and someone's on the brakes, the car stops, but the person keeps going and like hitting the seatbelt and hitting back. That's going to be an example of inertia. This is because the car has already stopped, but people don't stop because they still carry the leftover inertia from that car ride. The same effect can happen whenever a car quickly steps on its gas and the gas makes the car go forward, but the person hasn't gone yet. And so the person kind of hits the back of the seatbelt and they're going. It's because the car is going faster than the person because the car has inertia and people don't in the situation. It's all relative. So why is it important that people understand the use of physics for everything things? So by having this knowledge, you can do applications of, you can just generally understand that the entire universe revolves around physics. Without having physics, we would not have life, we would not have gravity, we would not have our solar system. We would all just be things flying off in random directions, just be completely random, or it wouldn't even be that. So this also allows the idea of different ideas. So by understanding the laws and rules of physics allows you to create certain experiments, certain things like better airplanes and better vehicles. These pretty much allow people to create a daily situation that affects us, that can make us better and faster and easier workers, and all these concepts that really make life easier. So by having these different ideas will allow the growth of new ideas. Because without having these rules in physics and laws, we just flat out wouldn't have the normal life that we have today. And so that's my conclusion of my slides. And then I have my works cited, and so I want to thank these people at the very end, and thank you for listening.